Today we're going to talk about the 23rd Psalm. Not in its entirety, really just one verse, but I'm also going to refer a little bit to the first three verses, but we're mainly going to be talking about verse 4 that is on the front of your bulletin, and Chris is going to read it for us now.
Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. For you are with me, your rod, your staff, they comfort me.
We all know that the 23rd Psalm is one of the best known chapters in the Bible, right? And I feel that this verse, the fourth verse, is probably the best verse in that chapter. A lot of preachers will preach a sermon on the entire 23rd Psalm. Well, I chose one verse. I'm going to refer to 1, 2, and 3, but there's a lot in that fourth verse of the 23rd Psalm. And if you ask a non-Christian about the 23rd Psalm, I guarantee you they've heard of it. If you ask them what are some of the words in it, they're probably going to say, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. That's probably something that they will know, because it is that well known. Even if they've never been in a church, they've probably heard those words before. Today we're really going to look at verse 4 because it does say a lot. In the first three verses of the 23rd Psalm that David wrote, David's talking about lying in green pastures and walking beside peaceful waters and having his soul refreshed and being led along by his loving shepherd. And then all of a sudden, all that happiness disappears. And he starts talking about what he says in verse 4. The happiness, the pasture, the green pastures, the still water disappear. And he starts talking about the shadow of death. It's a completely different change in the subject, plus another way that I'm going to tell you about in a little while. And you ask, well, how does that happen? How one minute you're in a green pasture lying down counting the stars or the birds or the clouds and beside a calm sea of some kind, and the shepherd's there taking care of you, and then the next thing you know, you're in a deep, dark valley of death. It's a complete change in what David was writing. I'm sure some people, first time they read that, they say, well, what was he thinking? I mean, he's doing all these happy stuff, and then bam, he hits you with the valley of the shadow of death. Evil is what he's talking about. But that's reality. You know, sometimes you hear these overly smiley preachers on TV. They want to edit the fourth verse from the 23rd Psalm and not talk about that at all. They want to tell you that God's only got great things in store for you. Your life's going to be happy and full of adventure and full of prosperity. It has nothing to do with the shadows and the darkness and the evil. That's what they want you to believe. And that's what they'll preach to you from their pulpits. And you need to not believe that. You need to get away from people that are saying that. Don't fall for it. A belief system or a religion that tells you there will not be darkness and evil in your life is not true. We all have it. It happens to all of us. Sure, God's going to let us lie down in green pastures sometime. Sure, He's going to lead us beside still waters sometimes. But everybody knows that a good shepherd will also lead his sheep through those dark valleys when bad things happen. And the key word there is lead. He's beside you and behind you and guiding you through those times. And that valley is not just dark. It's the valley of the shadow of death. That means you're near death. You're standing in its shadow. I don't know if you want the death angel or whatever is cast a shadow over you. You're at your lowest point in your life. And those valleys of life are there. And during those times, we are afraid. We fear for things, don't we? We all have things that we fear about. I know you've all got 2 or 3 things that you fear, that you're afraid of in your life. And I'm talking about earthly fears, things that happen to us here on earth. Troubles and disappointments in our lives, the thing. What is it? Think real quickly. What are the things that frighten you the most? What are the things that you are fearful of in your life? What are the things that keep you in that valley of the shadow of death, which is a valley of fear? What are those things? Well, maybe it's the fear of losing your job. Maybe it's the fear of having to keep the job you've got now for the rest of your life. Maybe you're afraid of what might happen to your kids. Maybe you're afraid you won't have enough money in the future. Maybe you're afraid of health problems. Maybe getting old causes you to be fearful. Maybe dying young causes you to be fearful. Maybe you're struggling with the fear of what's going to happen with our government, or a fear of what's going to happen with our economy. Those are true fears that many, many people have right now. Some of you are afraid you'll never get married. Some of you may be afraid you're going to have to stay in the marriage you got right now for the rest of your life. Some people are afraid of being abandoned. Some people are afraid of being alone. Maybe you're afraid that people are going to find out what you're really like. Or maybe you're afraid, your fear is that no one is ever really going to understand you and really know who you are. Maybe you're afraid that you've already messed up your life so bad you'll never be able to recover. Maybe you're afraid that your past has damaged you beyond repair. Afraid of the end times, afraid of persecution, afraid of failure, afraid of being rejected by those around you, afraid of being injured, afraid of diseases, afraid that your deepest desires and wants in this earthly life will never be fulfilled. Afraid of going to hell. I just mentioned 25 basic fears that people have. And I guarantee you I touched everyone in here with one or two or more of those. Because we all have those fears. We all have some of those. Hopefully none of you have all of those. But I don't think that's possible. But our life is full of threats and full of dangers. And when we see them coming, we get scared. And when they sneak up on us and we don't expect those things to happen, we're even more afraid, aren't we? Because you don't know what's going to happen. You can't see into the future and know what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day. That causes fear in you. Maybe you find a mass under your skin and you don't know what it is. Fear. What is most people's greatest fear? Death. That is the universal answer. Is what is your greatest fear? It's the fear of death. But that's what you are afraid of is not death as in the Bible. What you are afraid of is earthly death. Death in the Bible is defined as separation from God. To God, when you are not with Him, you are dead. When you go to hell in the end times at the great white throne judgment and you're put on that side in the sea of fire, then you will be separated from God, and that is death to God. That's the death that you should be afraid of, that should make you fearful. This earthly death is just a continuation of your soul from life here to life with Him. It's something that you really shouldn't be afraid of, but that is most people's main fear, is the fear of death. But the psalmist, David, tells us that we will have no fear. And why is that? Because he tells you, because you, God, will be with me. You should have no fear because God will be with you. I read just recently about a young child who was on a train ride with his father. And they were riding along, and the little boy was 5, 6 years old. He was getting a little jittery, like little boys that age do. We know. Our grandson never stops. Well, the little boy, the dad says, stand up and walk. So the little boy goes to the lady across the aisle from him, and he starts to talk to her. And she says, who are you here with? And he said, my daddy. And she said, well, who gave you that shirt you're wearing? And he said, my daddy. And she said, well, who bought you that baseball cap you're wearing? And he said, my daddy. My daddy brought me. My daddy. And then he stopped because the train went into a tunnel and it turned completely dark. And the little boy ran back across the aisle, grabbed his daddy and said, Daddy, Daddy, it's dark. Why is it dark? Well, that's exactly what David did in this psalm. First, he's talking about his father in the first 3 verses. And in verse 4, he's talking to his father, just like this little boy did. He's talking about his father. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me, he leads me. And then in the 4th verse, David starts talking not about him, but to him. You lead me. It's a complete change, just like this child did. First he's talking about God, and then he's talking to God, and God is the shepherd that he's talking about. The Lord is my shepherd. This whole psalm, the 23rd Psalm, which is probably many people's favorite chapter in the whole Bible, it's a celebration of the fact that God is the shepherd and that God will provide for you everything that you absolutely need. And one of those things that you need is protection. Because we resemble sheep in so many ways. That's why God is called the shepherd. Because his people, his creation, resemble sheep. You know, sheep make a joke of the phrase, survival of the fittest. That's not what it is with sheep. You know, they survived for thousands of years, but they're some of God's creation's most needy animals. You know, that's why there are no wild sheep. They can't survive because they're so needy. If they were wild, they'd soon be dead. They can't blend in and hide because they're bright white. They can't fight back because they can't bite or claw their way out of a mess. If they're attacked, they stand there and die. That's the way sheep are. If they were on their own, without the shepherds, they would quickly become extinct. What do you think would happen to the human race without our shepherd? We would be what God calls dead, separated from him. If your shepherd stopped protecting you, your spiritual life would be over by bedtime. You would be dead to God. Your faith would be gone, and that enemy, the demons, Satan and his army of fallen angels, would devour you. They would take over your life before the day was over. But you have protection from those evils and those evil demons of this world. God protects you in that valley of the shadow of death. But what exactly is that valley? You know, the Hebrew word that was used by David in writing the psalm could better be described as the deepest darkness or the gloomiest darkness there is. So David's talking about a really bad place. The place where you're the least excited, where you're the most downtrodden, where you're the most in danger, where you're the most without any hope for tomorrow is what David is talking about. That is the valley of the shadow of death that David's talking about here. Even though I walk through the valley of the really severe extreme darkness, I won't be afraid. That's a pretty profound statement. When all your fears come out, when you're facing them every day of your life, you won't be afraid. You should not be afraid. Why should you not fear? Why not? Is it because you're really strong by yourself? No, that's not it. Because you're really brave? No, that's not it. Is it because you're super sheep and you can handle any wolf that comes along? Demon? No, that's not it. Why are you not afraid in that dark, dangerous valley? Is it because you believe in yourself and you have great self-esteem? That's not what David says. We're still as sheep-like as ever. We're just as weak and vulnerable and defenseless and helpless as any other sheep. But you're not to be afraid. Why? Because of 4 of the greatest words in the Bible. You art with me. You are with me. Those verses, those words that David wrote in the 23rd Psalm are some of the greatest words in the Bible. Those 4 words. He's talking about the shepherd. You are with me. The presence of God in your life should take those fears away from you when you're in that valley. You simply should not be afraid because you know that God is with you if your life is right. I don't think there's any four sweeter words in the Bible, are there? You are with me. That's a great thing if you can say that. If you can say, God is with you. And in speaking to him, not about him, you say, you are with me. Say it in your prayers. If it's true. If you want it to be true, say it over and over. Make it true. In the way that you live, in the way that you feel, and the things that you think. You shouldn't have to worry about what other people are thinking of you or saying about you, how your life's going, what you're going to do tomorrow about your job, your illness, sickness, all that. What you should be saying is, you are with me, God. Lead me through this dark valley. And you need to understand, David told us how God takes care of his sheep. The last part of that verse, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Now, a rod used by a shepherd was usually a short club, and they would embed rocks or something sharp into the end of it to beat off the wolves and the other predators coming after the sheep. The staff was much longer. I'm sure you've seen pictures of the tall, long staff with a crook at the end. That was used to guide the sheep. So what David is saying here is God will protect you and God will guide you. That is what should comfort you, knowing those things. To protect us and guide us, the staff and the rod are there. Those are the tools of God's trade. That reminds me, when I was growing up at First Baptist Church in Bubach, this is a true story. The deacons, we had 2 aisles and 3 sets of pews. In the middle set of pews, the second row, the deacons always sat. There were 8 or 9 of them because they did the offering and the greeting and they said the prayers. And there was one deacon, he was this great big man. His name was Hudson Avery. He was probably 6'4" and a big stocky man, had a big, loud, deep voice. And the preacher would call on him to pray and you could hear, oh, in the church. Because Mr. Hudson Avery was a prayer. He would pray and pray and pray and pray. And you could hear people snoring and go, oh, come on, come on. And then near the end of his prayer, he would say, guide, guard, and direct our lives. And everybody would go, whew, he's finished. Because the next word would always be amen. But he ended his prayers with guide, guard, and direct our lives, which is exactly what the shepherd does to his sheep, which is exactly what God will do for you. He will guide you, he will guard you, and he will protect you with his rod and his staff, just like David said in the 23rd Psalm. He's there to protect you from the dangers in that dark valley. Comfort you, as it said, which means to protect you. So what are you afraid of? Is the Lord your shepherd? If not, you have reason to fear. Those 25 or so fears that I mentioned earlier will be bringing you down every day if the Lord is not your shepherd. If you're not asking him and believing that he will guide and guard and protect your lives. No matter how much pain you're in right now, you have reason to celebrate if you are a believer, because the shepherd is there. And the shepherd is the good shepherd, which is God, and he will provide what you need to make it through that deep, dark, scary valley of the shadow of death. Yes, he will make us to lie down in green pastures, and he will lead us beside the still waters, and he will restore our soul, and he will lead us in the paths of righteousness, as the psalmist says. Even in the valley of the shadow of death, that deepest, darkest, scariest place, you need not fear any harm, because he is with you. Amen.
Amen.